Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of rooming houses on 9th Street, 10th Street, 11th Street, all through there. They were rooming houses. Most of your houses there were used as rooming houses, and quite a few people stayed there, I know, through the 50s and even into the early 60s.
Well,
So it's quite possible.
The thing, Mike, you are one of the few who actually had attended Coffee and Confusion, so
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here. And you had a pretty amusing story about one time you
Yeah,
and your
right.
friends were going to go in there and raid the place.
Well, we used to hang at Rands, Vinnies, Haylofts, all the rock and roll places. So a group of us heard about these beatniks, and we were going to go down there and we would tear that place apart. The ducktails and the taps on the shoes. Walked in there, and these guys, this is back probably 60, 61, maybe even 59, they had the long hair, which I guess it took a lot of guts at that time for guys to have long hair. Well, they treated us so nice. I mean, like, come on in, welcome. And I told the guys I was with, I said, nah. And I said, just lay off. Well, we left there, we went back on 14th Street, and I said, damn. I left my jacket back there. So they wanted to come with it. I said, no, I'll get it, I'll catch up with you guys. Because at that time, 14th Street, you had all the bars and the nightclubs. We were all pretty close together. Went back there, started hanging out there, but I wouldn't bring my buddies. And they had some great folk music. I mean, they had folk music, they had poetry. It was a different world.
Yeah, and the thing with Coffee and Confusion, where it was situated at 10th and K, it was kind of a really bizarre place because one block over was 9th Street.
You also had the Ozarks right around the corner from there.
Just going to get to that. 9th Street was basically DC's answer to Times Square at the time. You had the Gayety Burlesque Theater, you had all the bookstores, the Central, the Bargain, the Park bookstores. You had Joe Dell's restaurant, which was a real rough place. They played country music. You had peep shows, you had pawn shops, the whole thing. 10th Street, just 2 blocks down from 10th and K, at Coffee and Confusion was the Ozarks.
Yeah, you had Ozarks, but then you also had Vinnies, where Link Wray played.
Yeah, well, Link Wray played there later. In 59 and 60 and 61, Link Wray and Raymond were at the Rendezvous, farther down 10th Street.
Right.
Then they went to the Ozarks, and the Vinnies, I think, opened up in like 61.
Yeah.
And 61 to 64, so.
60 to maybe 63, because then they played at the, I think it was a place across from the Rocket Room. I can't recall the name of Famous.
Yeah, but these were really rough nightclubs. The Ozarks
they were.
and Vinnies. The Vinnies was like one of the roughest nightclubs in DC. So you
Plate
had this
glass window be broken out of there every single week.
Yeah, and then you went a couple blocks over and you had 14th Street. On 14th, you had the Casino Royal at 14th and H. You had the Blue Mirror that was booking rock and roll. On the other side, you had Benny's Rebel Room, the Park side.
You had Rands on the other side.
14th and Odd, the Hayloft was
and the Hayloft right across the alley. They were all together, actually.
And these were all rock and roll nightclubs. Yeah. So, and mixed into that, this rough atmosphere, you had the beatniks had one place they could sneak into, and that was Coffee and Confusion. They kind of, climbed into the basement down there and just had their own little world going.
What was tough for me, I worked at WDON at the time, which was Rock and Roll, Rhythm and Blues. I couldn't tell these people, I really love folk music, but my buddies, I couldn't tell them this. So I'd sneak down there, we'd all go downtown, I'd break away, sneak down there, and then catch up with them later. Well, hey, where'd you go, man? And I said, gee, I just wandered around. But I would never take my buddies back there after that, but it was a wonderful place. I mean, it was another world, but it was so far off of rock and roll, rhythm and blues. I mean, it was just totally a different world.
Yeah, and it was the only place where people who followed the beat generation, the literature and the poetry could go and hang out and be with people who shared similar interests and were interested in going up and reciting the poetry. Now, you go down there today, every time I go down Martin Luther King Library, I used to drive down there and park in the basement. You can't do that anymore. They hustle you out after 1 hour. But I used to drive by 10th and K. If you go down there, there's a sister building. The weirdest thing, when they built that Mount Vernon Square neighborhood, they put up 2 identical 3-story Victorian buildings. And the Coffee and Confusion building, the Zanzibar building, got torn down. The sister building is still there, 1 block over. So you can go there and see exactly what the old Zanzibar building looked like before they tore the thing down. But you go downtown and it's all torn down. All the places we talked about. The Ozarks is gone. The Rendezvous is now the FBI building. Coffee and Confusion, they're putting up some kind of office building there. The whole 14th Street area has been knocked down and cleaned up. The places in Upper 14th Street, one of the very few nightclubs still left was one of the originals, Maynard's Restaurant. I think it was 1508 14th Street, and it operated. It's been Sam's Pawnbrokers for about 30 years or so, and it's still Sam's Pawnbrokers, but that's one of the very few original rock and roll buildings that's still standing. Anybody else have anything? Yeah.
Yeah. Were Ed Saunders or Thule Kupferberg ever in the D.C. area?
Yeah, the Fugs played a little bit later at the Ambassador Theater, I think in the fall of 1967. And they, Jeff, you should know this, they came up when they had that protest thing and Norman Mailer and those guys talked.
To the March on the Pentagon.
March on the Pentagon in October '67, the Fugs did a headline at the Ambassador Theater. That, I believe, is the only reference I've ever seen to the Fugs playing D.C. They could have come back after that, but I don't think so. But yeah, they played at the Ambassador Theater, and probably in October '67 they headlined. I think they only played there one night, but I could be wrong on that.
You mentioned the Unicorn.
Yeah.
Was the proprietor of that the same individual who started the Unicorn Times?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I meant to mention that. Elliot Ryan.
Right.
Elliot Ryan, after he gave up the Unicorn Coffee House in '64, he worked at a number of hotels in the area. And he wanted to get back involved in the music scene. So in October of '73, he launched the Unicorn Times newspaper and kept it going until about 1986. And yeah, that was Elliot Ryan. And Unicorn Times, of course, was a great local music publication.
You mentioned, when I get an idea, when I'm thinking about a rough place, you mentioned that these places were rough.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking back to that time, obviously it was around then, but what is a rough place back? Like what, you talk about
this
like
is
Western.
one of my favorite subjects.
What is a rough,
Everybody
All right.
turns and looks at you when you walk in.
Rough.
You have to realize, I was never in any of these places. I was born in 1962, so I was too young.
So I'm saying, what is
hold on, whoa, let me go.
Then-
Then you can correct me. Of all the musicians I've talked to, the guys who are of what I call the Link Wray era. Link Wray, I don't think people really appreciated what a pioneer this guy was, because this is in the late 50s, and he came out in a black leather jacket, and when they played at Vinnies from '61 to '64, it was all bikers. And before the night was over, the cash register would go through the plate glass window, and they'd just go insane. Vinnies, I've polled guys who played with Link, who were in these bands, and they said absolutely the roughest nightclub in the history of Washington, D.C. was the 1023 in Southeast. And you went to the 1023, and it was a squat, one-story brick, it looked like a garage, built into the side of a hill. And guys would go in there, and I've heard so many different stories. My favorite one was Link Wray came in one night, and the bikers loved him. Pagans hung out there, and all these other groups, the Kamikazes and Satan's Spew, which were popular with DC biker clubs. And Link walked in and went to the bathroom, and they had some guy in a stall and were just wailing away on the guy, and they stopped when Link came in. They said, "Oh, hi, Link, how are you?" And he used the urinal, he turns around and goes, "Okay, boys, carry on." And they just went back to bothering the guy. Stories that Link Wray and the Raymond would chain up their guitars when they left the stage. I remember Thumper, John Malloy of the Fallen Angels, telling me that. His teen band, the Reachers, came in Beatle boots and Beatle haircuts, and they went on stage at the 1023 to open up for Link Wray, and he looked out and he said, "The Greasers wanted to kill us," and and then they played, but they got out of there okay. I talked to a fellow named Don Cora, who had been the bouncer, the doorman at the 1023 for years and years, and Don Cora was, he's like 6'6", 300 and something pounds. He played pro football. He played in high school in Prince George's County and went to McNeese State and played for some NFL teams in the 60s. And the place was so bad, he got knifed several times. He said they didn't think twice. It was basically all, it was an era of Southeast DC. And this is in '65 and '66. It was an era where Southeast DC was rapidly changing from a white area to a black area. And the whites who were left over, I can't really describe what it was like. They were sort of like the people who hung out here were mutants from another time. It was a throwback to another era. And if you came into this nightclub and they didn't know you, you were not going to get out in one piece. It just wasn't going to happen. Hold that thought. And so what happened with the 1023 is that, to make a long story short, it's incredibly rough. There were just incredible fights, and the police never went there. They left Link Wray alone, and it was just, you know, I heard all kinds. Jack Van Horn, who passed away, he told me that there was a group of, you know, bikers from Southeast in there, and if they saw somebody they didn't know, they'd send one of their girls up and ask the guy to dance. And if the guy was stupid enough to dance with the woman, all of a sudden he was surrounded by these guys. You know, you're dancing with my girl, and the band, Link Wray and his guys would be playing away, and it's just, you know, a brawl would break out. It's a nightly occurrence.